Some big news. President Joe Biden has now officially pardoned Hunter Biden. Now, let me explain. This pardon comes despite Biden previously pledging that he would not pardon Hunter Biden. And let me know your thoughts in the comments on the pardon. Do you think he should have done it? Do you think he shouldn't have done it? Let me know. Also, the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency, and there's long been an international effort to overturn it as the world reserve currency. And now it seems like that whole conflict over trying to overthrow the U.S. dollar, that may be coming to an end. President-elect Donald Trump is warning Brics nations, including China, Russia, Iran, others, that if they try to abandon the U.S. dollar, if they challenge it, they could face 100% tariffs and basically be cut off from the United States. And on the topic of tariffs, notably Canada, Mexico, while they seem to be signaling support for the United States now after Trump threatened them with tariffs related to the drug trade. And in other news also, Donald Trump has announced Kash Patel as his nominee to serve as FBI director. Kash is the former chief of staff to the acting Secretary of Defense and other titles as well. Now, we talked about these topics and more today, so let's dive into it. First of all, folks, last night, President Joe Biden signed a full and unconditional pardon for his son, Hunter Biden. Now remember, Hunter Biden was charged with 9 counts of federal tax evasion to the sum of about $1.4 million between 2016 and 2019. And in a separate case, was convicted by a jury of illegally purchasing a firearm while using drugs in 2018 and lying about the drug use at the time of the purchase, meaning an illegal firearm. Now, this pardon is a 180 for Biden. It comes after Biden had previously declared that he would not use his extraordinary presidential powers to pardon his own son. This is Biden's statement on this. He said, "Today I signed a pardon for my son Hunter. From the day I took office, I said I would not interfere with the Justice Department's decision-making, and I kept my word even as I have watched my son being selectively and unfairly prosecuted. No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's case can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. There's been an effort to break Hunter, who has been 5.5 years sober, even in the face of unrelenting attacks and selective prosecution. And he said, in trying to break Hunter, they've tried to break me, and there's no reason to believe it will stop here. Enough is enough. For my entire career, I have followed a simple principle: just tell the American people the truth. They'll be fair-minded." And he said, here's the truth. "I believe in the justice system, but as I have wrestled with this, I also believe raw politics has infected this process, and it led to a miscarriage of justice. And once I made this decision this weekend, there was no sense in delaying it further. I hope Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision." In other words, Joe Biden is suggesting the political system has been the justice system has been politicized, and the politicization of the justice system is what led to the prosecution of his son. Ironically, the same thing Trump has been saying, that there's a politicization of justice that led to his selective prosecution. And Biden, of course, moving on this pardon, something he said he would not do. The reason that he would not do it before, and the reason this would be so controversial, is because it actually aligns with the narrative that Trump and his supporters have been pushing. This idea that the justice system has been used politically. And also that, no one is above the law. Well, obviously that's not the case. Some people are above the law. This, of course, throws a wrench in a lot of the core narratives that the Democrats have been pushing to justify the prosecution of Trump and everybody around him. And now this kind of similar nature of what's happening right now, especially as Biden is calling out politicization of justice, really messes up that narrative. Now look, the breadth of the pardon has been noted by people on both sides of the aisle. The pardon covers Hunter Biden from ever facing charges over any crimes he could have possibly committed over the time span of a decade from 2014 to 2024. He's pardoned for everything that was on the surface, everything that could have been, and everything that we may possibly find. He's already pardoned for all of it. This is the exact wording from the pardon. This is a statement from President Joe Biden. It says a full and unconditional pardon for those offenses against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024, including but not limited to all offenses charged or prosecuted, including any that have resulted in convictions by Special Counsel David C. Wise. Now, look, as expected, there's been a lot of response from both sides of the aisle. Republicans are talking about it, saying, you said you wouldn't do it, now you've done it, and saying, ha ha, look at this. Democrats are saying, how could you do this, because it basically messes up the whole narrative they've been pushing over the prosecution of Donald Trump. But here is incoming President Trump's reaction to it. This is what Trump said. Trump said, quote, does the pardon given by Joe to Hunter include the J6 hostages who have now been imprisoned for years? Such an abuse and miscarriage of justice. In other words, Trump is also suggesting, yes, politicization of justice, you were absolutely right, but there are others who've been victim of this as well. Now, folks, in other news, there's an international effort to overthrow the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency. And doing this would break a key part of the U.S.-led world order because it could disable America's ability to use sanctions. And sanctions, if we sanction Iran, if we sanction Russia, if we sanction China, if we sanction whoever else, that's often something you can do to stop a bad behavior or a brewing war without us needing to send troops there to actually go to war. This lets us avoid war as a conflict resolution because we can sanction countries. Now, if America loses the dollar as the world reserve currency, that power gets removed. And the effort to remove that power is mainly being pushed by the Chinese Communist Party. This recently came to a head under Brics, right? This whole Brics international order. But now President-elect Donald Trump, not even president yet, is calling out this effort directly and is saying that any country involved in this effort to overthrow the U.S. dollar is going to face 100% tariffs. Any country that dares get involved with it. Now, look, first is some background. Brics is an intergovernmental organization of 9 countries. These countries are China, Russia, India, Brazil, Iran, South Africa, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates, and then several others that kind of participate along with them. Now, just recently, the member countries in this Brics alliance, they unveiled the next step in their agenda, and at the same time presented a symbolic Brics note. They actually have a Brics bill presented by Vladimir Putin himself. Now, look, to be clear, this is not yet real currency. It's just symbolic, and it's a message they've been sending out. This is October 24th, Financial Express. They said at the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, a symbolic BRICS banknote was unveiled, igniting discussions on reshaping global finance. Now, they said the banknote, the one they showed, which features the flags of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, symbolizes the collective ambitions of these nations to explore alternatives to the U.S. dollar in cross-border transactions. This development highlights the growing effort within BRICS to establish a more independent economic system, one less reliant on Western financial structures. And it said Russian President Vladimir Putin made it clear at the summit that the BRICS nations are not outright rejecting the U.S. dollar, but are preparing alternatives if access to it continued to be restricted. And they said, quote, the dollar remains the most important tool in global finance, but using it as a political weapon undermines trust in the currency, Putin remarked. And he stated that BRICS will not fight against the dollar, but will seek alternative methods if the situation necessitates it. And he said, quote, if they block us, we'll find alternatives. And he underscored, of course, the pragmatic approach BRICS is adopting, it says. Trump is basically saying, well, undermine the U.S. dollar and you're going to have to find alternatives. That's the message Trump is sending. Not only will you look to find alternatives, you'll be forced to find alternatives. That's the new message. But back to this, it says Putin's remarks echo within the larger context of sanctions imposed on Russia, which have significantly limited its access to global financial systems dominated by the dollar. All the sanctions put on them for the war with Ukraine. Now look, the idea of this plan, they've been floating it for a long time. This has been a long time in the making, right about to reach its fruition. They're just about to do it. They've been planning it, they've been working on it, they've been discussing it, they finally came out and unveiled it, right? The Chinese Communist Party has for years been trying to create an alternative global order. And one of the core pieces of that, they need the financial element. They created, of course, the Asian Investment Bank. They created different structures. They tried to make the Chinese currency their reserve currency when dealing with Russia. And they found they can't really do it because they still have to go through the banks. And when they go through the banks, they find they can't process the payments and it's not working. Meaning they've found they're stuck with the dollar, and to get out of that, they need desperately to create an international agreement for this. Now, like the Foreign Policy Research Institute said back in January that, quote, Xi Jinping aims to position China at the helm of a worldwide economic order, shielded from the dollar's impact regarding sanctions and the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunications Systems, that's SWIFT. The SWIFT was founded in 1973 as a global provider that connects around 11,000 banks and is used by more than 200 nations. And it notes, SWIFT has a virtual monopoly over the world's financial exchanges, and it is almost impossible to conduct business without them. However, Xi Jinping plans to outcompete the U.S.-led SWIFT through the China-led Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, or CIPS, organization, and the Russian-led System for Transfer of Financial Messages, that's the SPFS. It says it's proving to be a formidable rival to the United States in their conquest to reshape global economics and geopolitics. Now, what the CCP wants basically is to become a competing global leader to the United States. And as the United States sanctions Russia for attacking Ukraine, as the United States threatens the CCP with tariffs and again sanctions if they try to invade Taiwan, as they go after and lock up the money for Iran, which was freed up recently, then restarted the global resurgence of terrorism. If we lose that ability, we lose the ability to govern the world under this whole U.S.-led idea of freedom and basic rights for the average person. The Chinese Communist Party, on the other hand, their standard is do whatever the heck you want to your civilians. Torture them, kill them, genocide them. The only thing that's wrong in the eyes of the Chinese Communist Party with its international order is if you criticize another nation for doing that. And notably, the CCP has been putting sanctions even on American public officials if they criticize slave labor in China, if they criticize live organ harvesting of political dissidents in China. If you criticize that, you get sanctioned by the CCP. The standard is do as you will, but don't criticize us for it. That is the CCP-led world order. Now look, this comes down to money, funny enough. The plan to use Brics for this effort to remake the global financial structure has also been emerging alongside a multinational effort to create the so-called multipolar world order. And under this whole multipolar world order, the United States would be torn down from the so-called unipolar world order, the US-led world order, right? It would instead just become a player among a global alliance of regional powers. The CCP is an alliance, Russia and the old Soviet bloc is an alliance, Western Europe is an alliance, Africa is an alliance, the Brics nations have their own alliance, again, Latin America, and then of course just the United States all by its lonesome. They want America to sit at a table as an equal player among all these blocs, led of course by the CCP's China model of communism and brutal social order, making that the main driver of global politics. That's what they're trying to do. Now look, just before the recent unveiling of the symbolic Brics currency, symbolizing this whole big move, Brazilian President Lula da Silva, he suggested that the international organization, Brics again, begin using a Brics currency for all trade and investment between each other. And the plan had some dissent, mainly because of some of the economic disparities between the Brics member nations. But it was made clear also that something along these lines was in fact in the works. They were trying to do it. Now at that meeting, CCP leader Xi Jinping was promoting what he called the reform of the international financial and monetary system, the creation of a new CCP-led economic world order. But now, folks, that's all off the table. Just recently, this whole plan just took a major blow. President-elect Donald Trump, not even in office yet, made a declaration which could relatively, utterly destroy the economy of any country that dares participate this in any regard. Here's what he said on November 30th. Donald Trump. He said the idea that the Brics countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new Brics currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the Brics will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America. That's what he's saying. You do it, you're cut off. Simple as that. Now, look, this is important because most of the Brics countries, they still heavily rely on trade with the United States. And most of them are not probably invested enough in the Brics organization to risk losing that. The Chinese Communist Party, one example, they're already facing threats of 60% to 100% tariffs, maybe even more than that if there's another 100% tacked onto that, under the oncoming Trump administration as soon as he gets in. Russia, well, they're currently under heavy sanctions, but they've been betting on Trump negotiating a peace deal with Ukraine. And if they get the peace deal, they're hoping to get those sanctions lifted. Iran, although also sanctioned, they could risk having their funds locked right back up again, which Trump did last time. The money was freed up, terrorism started again. All that money could go away right quick. And most other nations in Brics, such as India and others, well, they tend to otherwise avoid international conflicts like this. For them, it's likely the juice isn't going to be worth the squeeze. They're not that invested in it to risk losing all their international trade and risk getting cut off from the United States. It's not worth it for them. Now, it appears also, folks, that tariffs, on this note, they could become one of Trump's new preferred tools to defend the United States abroad and defend U.S. interests. Recently, he also caused some disputes by threatening Mexico, Canada, and the Chinese Communist Party with tariffs over their involvement in the drug trade and also in mass illegal immigration. All three countries, China, Mexico, and Canada, have major involvement in the international drug trade, even though the governments may not be involved per se. Just last week, Trump said that he would impose a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico unless they clamp down on drug trafficking and illegal immigration heading into the United States. And he said, in addition to the already planned tariffs on China, that he would hit the Chinese Communist Party with an additional 10% tariff on top of that. Meaning they're looking at like 210% tariffs if we got everything on here. This would be over the regime's involvement in the sending of deadly drugs to America, including fentanyl, killing Americans by the tens of thousands every single year. Now look, in response to that, Canada, they immediately worked to align with the United States. Canada seemed to be willing to work with the U.S. really quick on this. And they want to work with us to stop mass illegal immigration. They want to work with us to stop the drug trade. They're fully on board with the U.S. now. Mexico, they initially met this by threatening the United States with tariffs of their own. And then Mexico, they blamed America for the drug trade, saying that Americans buy fentanyl from the cartels, and so it's our fault. And the Chinese Communist Party, meanwhile, met this with veiled threats, saying to not underestimate them. But then look what happened. Well, the hard reality hit. More than 75% of Canada's exports go to the United States. We're like 75% of their economy, right? More than 83% of Mexico's exports went to the United States last year. They cannot survive economically without us. They need us a whole lot more than we need them. And even aside from the surface exports from Mexico, if you look at remittances from illegal immigrants here, if you look at the drug trade, the money which goes to Mexican cartel members, which flows to their economy, most of their money comes from here. They need us more than we need them, and this is becoming known now. And now look what happened. Within just a few days of Trump making threats of tariffs, things are now changing, at least within Canada and Mexico. Not so much with the Chinese Communist Party. They're going the other way. Now, first off with Canada, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he actually traveled to Florida to meet with Trump. CBC in Canada said this: Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President-elect Donald Trump discussed border security and Canada-U.S. trade during a surprise meeting at Trump's estate in Florida on Friday night. And they note that a Canadian government source who spoke confidentially to CBC said there was no guarantee that tariffs are coming off the table, but the Canadians left the meeting with optimism that a solution is attainable. The source also said that Trudeau promised to increase security along the Canada-U.S. border and specifically told Trump that he will increase helicopter patrols. One thing that struck Canadian officials, the source said, is how important the fentanyl issue is to Trump, and that anything Canada can do to help is going to be key to that. Now, Trump also took to social media, Truth Social, to comment on the meeting. Here's what Trump said. He said, quote, "I just had a very productive meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada where we discussed many important topics that will require both countries to work together to address, like fentanyl and drug crisis that has decimated so many lives as a result of illegal immigration, fair trade deals that do not jeopardize American workers, and the massive trade deficit the U.S. has with Canada. I made it very clear that the United States will no longer sit idly by as our citizens become victim to the scourge of this drug epidemic, caused mainly by the drug cartels and fentanyl pouring in from China. Too much death and hardship." He said Prime Minister Trudeau has made a commitment to work with us to end this terrible devastation of U.S. families. We also spoke about many other important topics like energy, trade, and the Arctic. Again, Arctic security becoming a new big thing. All are vital issues that I will be addressing on my first days back in office and before, which he's already doing, of course. Now, when it comes to Canada, the border with Canada is relatively unguarded when you compare it notably to the U.S.-Mexico border. A lot of the money also, the money laundering from the Mexican cartels tends to go through Canada. The money laundering operations are typically run by Chinese criminals, and they do a lot of the laundering through Canadian casinos. That's one of the main ways that the money laundering takes place for the international drug trade, through Canada. Then there's Mexico. The Chinese Communist Party made Mexico a focus of its drug war against the United States. Corruption, gangs, cartels, these are the tools of the Chinese Communist Party. Chinese manufacturers, they supplied the cartels with synthetic drugs like fentanyl and with precursor chemicals for other drugs like methamphetamine. It comes from China, notably. The cartels are just the foot soldiers. And Mexico, well, Mexico tends to get rich off the drug trade. They get rich off the human trafficking business and remittances from illegal immigrants when they cross illegally into the U.S. and send money home with every paycheck. The money from drugs, human trafficking, remittances goes back into the Mexican economy because it goes to people buying cars and houses and food and everything else, building businesses in Mexico and making their families rich. They're getting rich off of America. And now, well, it seems that Trump's plan to stop this, well, it's working. And why is that? Well, Trump and the president of Mexico, they held a phone call, which Trump detailed afterwards. And here's what Trump said about that phone call. He said, quote, just had a wonderful conversation with the new president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo. She has agreed to stop migration through Mexico and into the United States, effectively closing our southern border. No more mass immigration heading through Mexico. And he said, we also talked about what can be done to stop the massive drug inflow into the United States and also U.S. consumption of these drugs. Notably, again, remember on the Mexico side, they're saying, hey, we're victims of this too. Americans are buying the drugs, and it's, again, motivating people to sell it there. Trump says, again, that they're going to be trying to stop consumption of the drugs as well, which is interesting. He said it was a very productive conversation. And he continued saying this, Mexico will stop people from going to our southern border effective immediately. It's over. He said this will go a long way towards stopping the illegal invasion of the USA. Thank you. Now look, it does not seem there were many such talks between Trump and CCP leader Xi Jinping. CCP is off the table. It seems that they're like enemies of the United States at this point, basically. But Trump is calling out the communist regime directly, saying the CCP is attacking the United States using fentanyl. And combine this with the many other tariffs and trade attacks against the CCP, you're looking at major looming blows to the CCP's economy. The CCP's economy is already crashing. It's about to take a nosedive based on this. Now, look, in addition to this, Trump declared that his administration will launch a major advertising campaign to explain to the American people how bad fentanyl is. He declared by the time the campaign is over, everyone will know how really bad and the horror of this drug is, fentanyl. Now look, in other news, Trump has announced his nominee to serve as FBI director, and he has now nominated Kash Patel as the incoming director of the FBI. I'll be talking more about this nomination after I come back from a quick break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back in less than 60 seconds. See you soon.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. Donald Trump has announced the new nominee to lead the FBI. Folks, he has now nominated Kash Patel. Kash, you know, is the former Chief of Staff to Acting Secretary of Defense. He's also the former Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Counterterrorism at the National Security Council, in addition to many other roles. And as you might remember, Kash Patel also did a show with us here at the Epoch Times called Kash's Corner. And Kash getting nominated to lead the FBI could mean some really big changes for the agency. Kash has suggested before that if he were in charge of the FBI, he would get the FBI agents back on the field, chasing down criminals, and he's seen as a figure who could change the culture of the agency, allegedly, to depoliticize it, pull the politics out of the FBI, get them back onto fighting crime again, real crime, right? Now, Kash has also been at the forefront of exposing several campaigns going after Trump. Kash was one of the main guys who exposed the whole fake Trump-Russia allegations used in the 2016 elections, and he presented new information, notably on all the claims around January 6. It was Kash Patel who revealed publicly that Donald Trump had in fact tried to deploy the National Guard for security on January 6, and that Trump's requests for that were denied, meaning that Trump tried securing the Capitol and was not able to do it. He was blocked. Kash was the one who made that public. Now here's what Trump said on the official nomination. He said, quote, "I am proud to announce that Kash Patel will serve as the next director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Kash is a brilliant lawyer, investigator, and America First fighter who has spent his career exposing corruption, defending justice, and protecting the American people. He played a pivotal role in uncovering the Russia hoax, standing as an advocate for truth, accountability, and the Constitution. Kash did an incredible job during my first term, where he served as Chief of Staff at the Department of Defense, Deputy Director of National Intelligence, and Senior Director for Counterterrorism at the National Security Council." He said that Kash has also tried over 60 jury trials. This FBI will end the growing crime epidemic in America, dismantle the migrant criminal gangs, and stop the evil scourge of human and drug trafficking across the border. He said that Kash will work under our great Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to bring back fidelity, bravery, and integrity to the FBI. That, of course, being the slogan of the FBI. Now, Kash wrote about some of the issues he sees in an op-ed that he published in the Epoch Times last year. This is what Kash Patel wrote in the Epoch Times. He said, "The elite set of individuals that sit atop our federal agencies has completely weaponized our entire government apparatus. It is no longer a one-off mistake, but rather the international creation of a two-tier system of justice that has gone unchecked." He said, intentional creation. It says the resulting impact is a death knell for American faith in all three branches of government. And he said when it comes to U.S. government, there are no coincidences. Anything that masquerades as such is a strategic move to protect the upper echelons from ceding power to the proletariat they once rose from. Whether it's Russiagate, Trump impeachment #1, Trump impeachment #2, the Jan 6 committee, Hunter's laptop, classified docs, or an intel letter from 51 of our highest servants. They layered this two-tier system of justice by doing the same thing at each level, breaking the law. Illegal surveillance, unlawful congressional overreach, and judicial hustling have joined forces, and the result is a destruction of justice. Now, this is suggesting, of course, that Kash would try to uproot this corruption in the system that he observes. And notably, Kash, he would still need to be approved by Congress. There has been pushback against him, but also just about every other appointee Trump has. We'll see what happens with this. Most of Trump's nominees have been seeing pushback. They probably can't block all of them. They might try to focus on one or two. We'll have to see how this goes. Now, in addition to this, though, with Kash, Trump also announced Massad Boulos, a lawyer and business leader, as senior advisor to the president on Arab and Middle Eastern affairs. He nominated Sheriff Chad Chronister to lead the DEA, that's Drug Enforcement Agency, and he nominated real estate developer and former attorney Charles Kushner, the father of Jared Kushner, who's Trump's son-in-law, to serve as the new U.S. ambassador to France. And also Sebastian Gorka has been tapped for counterterrorism director. Again, one of the big advocates against terror networks in the Middle East and attacking Israel, of course. Now, let me know your thoughts in the comments about Trump's pick for his cabinet and non-cabinet positions, and let's jump into some questions, folks. That said, like this video, please leave a like. If you have questions, comments, leave them in the chat now. We'll jump into it. All right, let's see here. First question. E.K. Garden, you're saying, I miss seeing Made in America on labels. That was so 1980s, bring that back. Yeah, I don't really see it that much anymore. I mean, it's like a slap in the face that even American flags aren't even made in America a lot of times. I do think that, we lost most of our manufacturing. A lot of people say, hey, we lost most of it to China. They gave the Chinese Communist Party most favored nation trading status. This allowed the CCP to sell to us basically at our loss. And because it was cheaper for companies to go there, build, empires in manufacturing, and sell really cheap back to us, usually garbage, that of course created an economy that destroyed a lot of the American economy. A lot of the auto industry, remember Detroit used to be the heart of American auto industry, a lot of that was torn down because we let Germany and Japan maintain 100% tariffs on American cars. And what's the result of that? Well, Japanese and German vehicles are some of the most popular vehicles, able to undermine us on the international markets. Now, we've let them keep that, but the question is, will we allow them to keep keeping that? Especially because other countries have taken liberties and said, well, if they can give you 100% tariffs, well, so can we. And so America has tariffs on a lot of its goods, meaning that if things manufactured in America have trouble getting sold outside of America because we let them take advantage of us. The other big thing was NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. That, of course, put a lot of American businesses out of business. A lot of people who did manufacturing in America lost their businesses to Canada and to Mexico. And Canada, of course, having over 70% of its exports heading to the United States, Mexico having over 80% of its exports heading to the United States, not including the illegal exports. This has, of course, destroyed the American manufacturing sector to a large extent. Unless you want to sell within the United States, there's not much to sell. And so what happens if you're a business? Do you want to manufacture in America? If things manufactured in America get hit by tariffs when they go to Europe, if they get hit by tariffs and they go to Japan, if you have to pay additional duties and fees if you want to ship internationally and you could put your business in China and deal with that? Well, no. It's because we've tipped the scales. The scales of interest are tipped against America by our own hand through bad trade deals, bad negotiations, and we lose out on most of our trade deals. Americans are getting robbed by the world. We're getting plundered by the world by our own doing. And if you understand that America is pretty dang wealthy despite that, imagine what will happen if we stop letting them do that to us. Really. So I think things are about to change. I should note, the idea of bringing back American manufacturing, even the Democrats are talking about this. This is not necessarily just a Trump thing. Biden has been pushing for this as well, and even within the defense sector, they're now talking about the importance of domestic manufacturing, meaning whether it's Republicans or Democrats or whoever else, the big narrative now is restoring American manufacturing. This is on the table no matter who's going to be in office, probably. Let's see here, realitysreal.com. You're saying it's easy to forget about the northern border when the shinier object is at the southern border. Yeah, actually, even a lot of mass illegal immigration is now heading through Canada because it's easy, right? Now, the problem with Canada is seasons. If you want to travel there and illegally immigrate during the winter, you risk freezing to death. And there have been many cases of that, unfortunately. So it's more of a seasonal thing. Although when it comes to Canada, of course, and illegal immigration, they're also starting to crack down on illegal immigration. Justin Trudeau, notably, is putting a 2-year hold on incoming immigration, and he's restoring a merit-based migration program for Canada, meaning basically the next 2 years you're going to be watching Trump probably deport a lot of people. Canada, by locking down the country to mass illegal immigration also, is making it so that people can't just flee to Canada if they want to escape being deported. That's kind of what's being set up right now. Let's see here. Gina Mikulik, you're saying shielding people from consequences actually hurts them. I would 100% agree. Let's imagine. How many of you, when you were a kid, knew a kid who never got in trouble, right? Maybe you had a cousin who could get away with anything, and maybe there were other kids who, I think you can go too far with discipline also, don't get me wrong. But there are some kids who never got punished for anything, and they would always get patted on the back no matter what they did. What happened to those kids? The ones you saw grow up, what happened to them? The ones I knew like that turned out to be not very good people, frankly. Because they grew up with this idea that the whole world revolves around them, and they grew up with this idea that they can harm other people without facing consequence. a lot of those people are the kind you'd want to avoid because they don't see it as a bad thing to hurt the people around them. That's not helpful for them, and as they enter the real world, and you can kind of do that to good people because they won't hit you back usually, but you do it to a few bad people, they'll retaliate. You do find that people sometimes learn a very hard lesson when they live like that. And I believe you're referring to Hunter Biden, right? The question is, well, I would say with Hunter Biden, on the other side of it, what he was charged with was illegally buying a gun and tax evasion. I would say in another timeline, Hunter Biden could become like a libertarian politician. Look, a lot of people don't like the idea of the IRS going after people, and they don't like the idea of the government restricting firearms rights. Personally, I do think that Hunter was targeted mostly because of his relation to Joe Biden. At the very least, that's why most of us cared about the story, right? Let's really, seriously, that's what it was. People would not have cared about Hunter Biden were he not the son of Joe Biden. And if a guy, lied on a form to get a gun, I'm very much pro-Second Amendment, frankly. I'm very much pro-Second Amendment. I don't believe that guns should be regulated in the form they are, personally. I would not care about that story if it was not politicized. On the tax front also, I think the tax system is crazy, frankly. Now, does that mean that he should not face punishment for that? You be the judge, right? I do think going forward, even on the Trump side, they're talking about getting rid of a lot of the gun laws, frankly. They're also talking about redoing the tax system to make it so that a lot of this stuff wouldn't happen in the first place. The other side of it, some people are arguing that the kind of sweeping pardon of Hunter doesn't just relate to Hunter, because a lot of people would argue the tax charges and the gun charges were the least of the issues. A lot of it had to do with kind of international wheeling and dealing and whether some of that money had involvement with Joe Biden, especially with Ukraine, and remember the quid pro quo allegations and so on like that. Now, that being said, a lot of politicians, a lot of their family members do use the names of their family members as ways to do international deals. That's not uncommon. But many people regard that as a form of corruption, saying that, well, you shouldn't allow that to happen, especially if they're arranging meetings with these high-level officials, getting money from it, arranging meetings with the politician who's related to them. Remember, a lot of politicians have been accused of this. That was the basis, notably, of some of the Clinton allegations and so on, with the Clinton foundations and the different foundations some politicians have. That's the allegation, right? That's kind of off the table now. So we'll see, in other words. Judy Akeem, you're saying, I think the strength of the U.S. is its buying power, and the world can't afford to decouple from. Even now that the U.S. is not doing well economically, what you consider poor is already middle class here. That is true also. I understand some of the different discussions with this as well. That, I've talked before about, for example, with our military. The U.S. military deploying to Germany and the Philippines and just about every corner of the world. I think one of our biggest bases is in South Korea. The U.S. military is global. I have said on this show previously that, a lot of countries, they're able to spend money on, let's say, free healthcare and such because they don't have to have a military budget. That was one of the big allegations with the U.S. against Canada, that Canada can afford to not have a large standing military because we basically provide their military for them. We handle a lot of the patrols, we handle a lot of the defenses. With Japan for a long time, that was the case. They could afford to basically not have a military. They've changed that over the last decade, I should note, because again, they're now building up their military against China. Australia, that used to be the case. They were able to not have a large standing military because we basically provided it for them. They're now changing that because, again, threats from China. And many countries in Europe, that was the case as well. A lot of countries, if you understand the way that budgets for governments traditionally work, most of what the federal government would be spending money on is a justice system, law and order, basic infrastructure, and your military. Your military is usually a big part of your budget. And if you don't have to pay your military budget, you put it into all these other things. And America has a very large military budget because we basically provide the military for most of the free world. A lot of countries depend on the United States to defend them in the event of a conflict. We basically work as the global military. Now, the result of that is we pay a lot of money for it. Many other countries don't. There's a caveat to this, which is, well, first of all, a lot of countries have changed that. Many countries are now building up their militaries. A lot of that has to do, and you could argue that Trump had a big part of this, the U.S. saying, you need to start paying your fair share. We're not your nanny. We're not here to take care of you. You need to start pulling your own weight. That was one of the messages the Trump administration sent. The other allegation, though, the other piece of this, is that when America stations its military in Germany, in Taiwan, in Korea, in Australia, and everywhere else, those countries typically cover the bills on the basing. And that prevents us from having to shoulder the costs of staging the large military that we have. And ironically, this international arrangement allows America to have such a powerful military. It's because of this international agreement that we have the power that we have. And if you pull that back and say we're not going to play that role anymore, you will witness a weakening of the U.S. military. So there's two sides to it. Back to the economy, as Judy Hakeem is saying, that a large part of the American strength is U.S. buying power. That's true also. American influence also comes through the U.S. dollar. And many people question, why do we send money to all these countries? Why are we sending tens of millions of dollars to this random African country, this random country in Latin America? What do they do with all the money we send them? Now, I don't have the actual answer to that on why America does it, but I do have the answer to that on why countries usually do this. Because if you look back in history, America is not the first country to do that. This is why other countries do that. I'm not saying this is why America does it. I'm saying historically, this is why other countries have done this. It's because you want to maintain your currency as the world reserve currency. And imagine, if you go to a casino and they're saying, hey, $100 chips on the house, spend it. Here's a few chips, have the time of your life. You want them spending money. You want them to get used to using it. You want them to try it out. It's like a free trial on a service, right? The idea is, here's some money, spend it. They use the dollar, they keep using the dollar. That maintains the world reserve currency. You could argue, well, should we be sending money to every corner of the earth because we're losing money? Well, maybe not. But the other argument is, doing so is what makes us powerful. So, you could argue that we lose money on a lot of these things, whether it's military spending and defending the whole world, whether it's sending money to everybody and their cousin, and maybe their grand cousin as well, and everybody else. You could argue we lose a lot of money on that too. But it's also the fact that we lose on one side, but we gain in another way, which is America is strengthened because of that. A lot of our power comes from that. And so, there are two sides to that. It's not just purely black and white. We do lose out on a lot of these deals, but maintaining those deals is what gives us influence. On the same side, you could argue that we lose a lot of money on trade deals. We lose a lot of money dealing with Canada. We lose a lot of money dealing with Mexico. That is 100% accurate. But what does that also mean? It means that when Trump says, hey, Canada, quit sending drugs here, quit laundering money for the drug cartels, or we're going to tariff you, Canada sends the president of their country down to Mar-a-Lago to go have dinner with the president to try to stop it from happening. That's what happens. If you say, hey, Mexico, 80% of your economy is about to get a 10% tariff, unless you stop this. What happens? Well, because we're 80% of their export economy, they fold like a piece of paper, right? If you do not have that leverage, if you do not have the trade deficit, frankly, you don't also have the political influence. And it is the case that although we lose on a lot of our deals, the fact that a lot of countries need us a whole lot more than we need them. Seriously. They need us a whole lot more than we need them by a large extent. Really, America could 100% lose trade with Mexico, and we could just go to like Argentina or Thailand or something like that and get basically the same thing for just as cheap. It wouldn't hurt us one drop to lose that. Maybe a little bit because of ground transportation, but it wouldn't hurt us that much. It would hurt them a lot. They need us more than we need them. And it is because we traded a loss and we lose on a lot of fronts with these countries that we have that. And so this is a different way of looking at global diplomacy. I should note as well that when people criticize Trump for his approach to diplomacy, where he kind of wants America first, America interest, one of the other sides of that argument is that America first, you're going to lose influence over other countries if you do that too much. And which side is really America first? Is America first just domestic economy, or is America first international influence? Which do you deem more important? That's the sliding scale with this, right? And that's where it gets kind of a lot more complicated when you get into kind of the nuts and bolts of how the international world orders actually work. You don't want to lose American influence either. And for people who would criticize America, saying, well, we don't want the American world order anyway, the world before the American world order was a very different place. And the world post-America world order looks a lot like China. What the American world order actually represents is the idea of what government represents. To an extent, the American world order is a defense of the Bill of Rights globally. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of belief, maybe not right to bear arms. Maybe that'll be the next big one. But defending basic human rights is the American-led world order. We don't really ask much of any country, and frankly, again, we tend to lose on most of our deals with other countries. That is what the American world order is. If you get rid of that, you're looking at like CCP-led global slavery and debt traps, and CCP first and human rights abuses. That's the alternate world order. Martin McKenzie, you're saying, communism with Chinese characteristics, organ harvesting, social credit scores, slavery, militaristic foreign policy would be the model for the world order. Absolutely, and unfortunately. And that goes back to one of the big arguments that people have. A lot of people outside of America don't like America. Some people in America don't like America. But you know what it's like? It's like a rich kid saying they hate their parents. That's what it's like. Yeah, you can hate them for trying to say you guys should have some basic human rights, or hate them because you don't like their diets or you don't like their lifestyles. But you know what? They don't ask anything of you. America supplies a lot of this and asks for almost nothing in return. Even in terms of the leverage we exert, I talked about the different forms of leverage America has. We don't really ask much. We could do a lot more than we do. We don't really ask much from it. We let these countries walk all over us. We let them, trade at a significant deficit with us where we lose out. We supply their defense. We do a lot diplomatically. There are a lot of countries in Europe that basically pay their government budget by fining American businesses. Many countries in Europe, every single year, they will fine American companies $100 million, multiple companies. They'll fine Meta $100 million, they'll fine Google $100 million, they'll fine these countries $100 million. That covers their entire government budget. We're basically letting some countries in Europe fund their governments by fining American businesses, and we don't do anything about it. You know what I mean? And so they can hate us all they want. What are they going to be without us? You know, that's the other side of the argument, right? And the other side, again, as I mentioned, is what awaits on the other side if America goes away and what America represents goes away, which is, of course, the China model. If you look at the global communist bloc, they're vying for control. Look at the global communist bloc. If America goes away, what's going to happen to Europe when it faces, China, Russia, Iran, global terrorism, and of course, the growing South, which is aligning, of course, heavily with the CCP? What's going to happen to the global world order if you lose America and what America represents? That is a terrifying prospect, frankly. Again, it's the rich kid who doesn't, the rich kid who hates their parents, right? It's what it is. J.R. Williams has said, made in Taiwan was everywhere when I was growing up. Compared to made in China, the Taiwanese goods were much better. Yeah, that's actually going to be one of the big shifts we're going to watch also. The CCP has very poor manufacturing standards. If you want to watch, there's a lot of different studies that have come out on the toxins in CCP products. Toxins they use in the paint on children's toys, lead, carcinogens, everything. There's a lot of poisonous products coming out of China. A lot of the food is tainted. A lot of there have been issues where American companies try to go and look at the manufacturing hubs in China, and they go there, and there's either nothing there, like, there was supposed to be a building here, where is it? Or they go there, and they're looking around, and there's like guys painting stuff, and they look like they've never done it before. They're actors. There's a book called Poorly Made in China that talks about this. Poorly Made in China. There are a lot of books and studies on what has happened. They basically put on a big show and do fake pop-up manufacturing when there's inspections. And that raises some questions over, well, what does it look like when there aren't people watching? I can tell you, I've again, because I've talked to a lot of Chinese dissidents. I've talked to a lot of people who've worked in slave labor in China. Over the years, I've interviewed many people like this. What do they call them? Are they cashews? If you talk to people who, for example, do some of the pre-cracked nuts, I've actually read stories of people who worked in slave labor in China, and they do a lot of that using slave labor. They said that their hands are bleeding, there's like infections and stuff, and all that's going into the food. A lot of people who worked in that, they say, don't touch that stuff. Don't eat anything that comes from there. Because you're talking about people sitting around in a circle in their underwear, crushing nuts with these little things in their hands, and their hands are bleeding on the nuts. Like disgusting stuff. And for people who've been there and witnessed it, they're shocked that Americans still consume this stuff without knowing where it's coming from. We talk about slave labor in China, but you don't talk about what the conditions are that these people live in. Like, I've heard stories of people who do the real cheap Chinese chopsticks, the wooden chopsticks you get in like supermarkets and stuff, that, they're like bleeding and stuff on these things. Like you're eating with it. And they're horrified. There was a story, actually a real famous story. There was an individual who bought some Halloween decorations. They opened up the box, and there was like a help me note from a Chinese slave in this decoration box. You can find this story online. It was a real famous story. Basically begging anybody who would find it to come and rescue them because they're being held as slaves in China manufacturing Halloween decorations. We don't put two and two together and what the stuff actually means on the ground, right? We don't talk about this stuff. Yeah, actually here, there's a documentary on some of this. If you want to watch a documentary about the slave labor in China, It's called Letter from Masanjia. Letter from Masanjia. Masanjia. You can actually go to the website, letterfrommasanjia.com. I highly recommend watching it if you want to understand what Chinese manufacturing actually looks like. And if you want to understand, hey, cheap Chinese goods, this is why. It's worse than you imagine. The stuff we know on the surface is a drop in the bucket of how bad it actually is. And I think that if we get rid of this cheap Chinese manufacturing, if we start getting American manufacturing, heck, even Mexico manufacturing, if they can stop the drug trade and we can help them fight the cartels and get rid of those problems, they're a fantastic country otherwise. That'd be great. It'd be great for everybody, right? The CCP is like a blight on the world, the stuff they do. Yeah, here you go. We have the link in the chat, letterfrommasanjia.com. Another question here. TZ Burton, you're saying, our biggest export is our culture, and we are losing that quickly. That's another big thing, too. Hollywood used to be kind of the image of the United States. Hollywood, the music industry. We know what they call this. They call it soft power. There's hard power and there's soft power. Hard power is military. It's that kind of stuff, right? Strength. Soft power is culture. Now, you could say there's also like financial power and everything else. America used to have all of this. We still do have the most powerful military on the earth by a large degree. Not to mention, among the American people, we own like more guns than most of the world combined. Proudly, I might add. Proudly, I might add. But that's hard power, right? That's hard power. The average American growing up shooting our BB guns in our backyard is more experienced with firearms than most trained militaries in the world. In fact, in a lot of countries, because of the gun restrictions, even the militaries have limited shooting experience. They oftentimes, the average citizen doesn't ever really train with a real firearm. At the most, they might get to train with airsoft guns, which are basically like below BB guns. They shoot like plastic pellets. When I was a kid, one of my hobbies was target shooting. My grandfather on my dad's side, he's a retired Marine. He was on the Marine pistol team, and so he was a trick shot. You know what I mean? He used to taught my dad different shooting tricks. My dad taught me different shooting tricks. In Vietnam, although he was a captain, he also was a sharpshooter for a bit, and so I learned all these sharpshooting techniques, and so breathing techniques and so on. As a kid, I used to practice this stuff all the time. I had a pellet gun, which are .22 caliber if you get a good one. I had a pellet gun. I'd shoot targets for like hours a day sometimes. I used to love target shooting. I was a very good shot, actually. But I'm not unusual. This is not unusual for Americans. A lot of Americans are like me. A lot of Americans grew up shooting their pellet guns or .22s or whatever else for fun. When I was a kid, a .22 rifle was a toy. And not a toy, but it was like a toy. It was your fun gun because the bullets were so cheap. Like we used to go to I lived in San Diego. We'd go to Glamis, which is the desert, area east of San Diego. We'd go to Glamis. We'd ride dune buggies and motorcycles, and we'd shoot .22s at cans and stuff in the desert. Like that was my weekend as a kid. I used to love that stuff. Americans, we don't even think of this as power, but the average experience, the shooting experience of the average American is probably better than the trained militaries in a lot of countries because we grew up with this culture. Now, the other side of this is TZ Burton was saying is that our biggest strength actually is soft power, culture. I would say up until the woke stuff, up through the 90s and maybe early 2000s, American movies, American music, American TV shows, entertainment. This played a huge role in terms of how countries view us, right? Huge role in it. Because you know what it is? Like if you go to like Arab countries, do you remember that show Friends? Friends? That show is like one of the most popular shows in that country. If you go to a lot of countries, they view Americans in light of our entertainment. And then what happens when you start making our entertainment so weird that nobody can accept it? Well, people interpret Americans in light of that. I would argue a lot of that has to do with CCP influence over Hollywood and the production studios because they don't want America to have a positive image. They don't want our military to have a positive image. In fact, if you make a movie that shows the American military in a positive light, you cannot show that movie in China. And so the result of this is because of financial interest. Hollywood has become relatively anti-American. They have to present socialist values. They have to make America look bad. They have to make our military look bad, or they don't get the international sales. And the result of that is we've lost a lot of our soft power. And it's not just them. It's not just them. You know, I would say that communist infiltration of Hollywood, like the Hollywood blacklist, for example, has actually done a lot to undermine the United States and damage our reputation broadly. But soft power is a very important thing. All right, let's see, folks. All right, that said, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Actually, my team said we'll show you before we leave a trailer for the film Letter to Ma Xinjiao. So stick around for that after we say goodbye. We'll show you a trailer of that because we put that together. It's a great film, by the way. Join me tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And folks, thank you so much for being here as always. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.
It was a normal Halloween for Julie Keith. That is, until she found this letter.
It's a 1 in a million chance to be the recipient of a message in a bottle. Thousands of people here are under the persecution of the Chinese government party.
We start in China, where some big reforms have been announced.
It seems that they are going to, quote, abolish the re-education through labor system.
我把它一放大，我也是大吃了一惊。哎，我发现这封信很像我写的信啊。我呢，希望用影视的方式揭露马增家劳教所的邪恶。
如果他要出京，跟分局联系。
这个呢，就是马三家教养院投放求救信，也是在这里发生的。我们当时心里非常恐怖，这个感受就是五马分尸那感觉。
有良心没法看下去。
我妻子告诉我，家已经被抄了。他们在抓捕我。
干嘛呢？你说呢？
有生命危险，随时。但是他能不能恢复过来，就看他自己的体力。